Hey, everybody. Any few folks that are
Hello.
already online. Good to see everybody.
Welcome, welcome. We're going to give a few minutes here for everyone to log on. Richard, glad you're here. Happy Measurement Month. Look forward to seeing you in a week or two and celebrating your big recognition. Thank you for joining. We'll give everyone a minute to sign on. Glad you're here with us today.
Hey, Johannes. Good to see you. Good to see everybody.
All right. We're going to give a few
Angela and
more
I,
minutes.
Angela and I just got back from PRSA, or I got back from PRSA, and Angela was at IPR. So we're really excited to share some of the insights we've collected from those conferences, but also from our talks and some of our engagements at those conferences. And it'll just be a couple more minutes as people join. One more minute or so.
Right. If you're excited to share where you're coming from, feel free to put it in the chat. You don't have to. I'm joining you from Utah. The seasons are starting to change here. So it's lovely. Come visit me and ski. We're glad you're joining.
It's
And we're
less
just giving it a
exciting
minute
here in,
more.
in Mississauga, Canada. Unless you like baseball, we hit a great fall.
It's perfect. Hi, Marcus. Glad you're here. All right. I'm going to give just a couple more seconds and I'm going to jump us right in so we can use all of our time as the rest of our guests trickle in today. Just a minute more and we'll kick it off. Perfect. All right. Well, as the rest of our guests join us today, I'm going to kick us off. Welcome to our webinar. Your audience stopped clicking. Start measuring what actually matters. And we are celebrating AMEC Measurement Month. AMEC, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a recognized global organization that promotes best practices in communications measurement and evaluation. We at Fullintel were proud members of AMEC and even recent recipients of 8 of the 2025 AMEC Global Communications Effectiveness Awards. So really delighted to be part of the AMEC community. If you're not familiar with AMEC, we can copy in the website into the chat. Lots of really amazing and free resources for communicators. So we're really excited to share that with you today. Now, today we're going to share an extensive amount of information in a short amount of time that will help you navigate this new landscape and really support your communications goals. During the session, feel free to put any questions in the Q&A or the chat. Either one is fine. We'll get to them. We're going to make sure we leave time to answer any questions at the end. So again, feel free to put those either in the chat or the Q&A. And we will be ending our webinar at 45 minutes past the hour. So we'll leave time before then to answer those questions. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in. I am Angela Dwyer, VP of Insights at Fullintel. While many of you likely know what we do, who we are, for those who are joining us for the first time, we are a media intelligence company that specializes in human curated media monitoring and measurement combined with the best of AI. My background is in media measurement. I have spent more than 15 years helping brands prove value and improve performance through strategic measurement. I focused on developing metrics backed by scientific research. I've presented and published this research and will actually share several insights from my studies today. I am involved with various industry organizations to make sure I'm always learning and contributing to best practices in measurement. I currently serve as the director of the Institute for Public Relations Measurement Commission and on the board of the International Public Relations Research Conference, and of course, an AMEC member and involved with the PAGE community as well.
And I'm James Rubeck, the Vice President of Products here at Fullintel. I have a pretty weird background. I was a journalist, and then I was a PR professional, and then I was a technologist. But really, what I think about is for the last 16 years, I've been chasing news. And for the past 10 years, that's been AI enabled. Uh, this past year, through PRSA, we won a PRSA Silver Anvil for our AI enabled platform. We're so thrilled to be able to share a little bit more about how we're using AI in our technology. and using in AI and the work that we're doing for our customers as well, and trying to find new ways to work with our customers. When we're talking about those new ideas, today we're going to cover the new rules of recall and resonance. Really, this is to help us better understand how our brands are represented and how we can influence perceptions in this new AI-enabled age. We're going to dive into finding why the right coverage is needed for those signals to work. And it's so crucial when you're evaluating your brand. And ultimately, how that human curated data helps in automated and AI workflows. Third, we're going to look at some of those AI workflows and show you some new ways to expand your own mental model to help you become the most powerful early warning system in the world. I want you to consider this article. What do you remember when you read? What are the elements that you remember an hour from now, 30 minutes from now, or even by the time we switch to the next slide? Because if you can figure that out, exactly what people remember, you're ahead of the game. It's the game we're all playing. It's the game publishers are playing. It's the game public relations are playing. It's the way governments are playing. And in this day and age, it's everything.
Well, as you know, the media landscape is changing. In fact, change seems like the only constant right now. Social media continues to be a source of information as people seek content from people they trust, and a lot of that's online. And almost half of a search screen is now covered with the Google AI overview. So if you're Googling, which all of us still kind of do, right? A little bit, you are being spoon-fed AI search engine responses in the AI overview. As a result, clicks are down. In fact, 60% of overview searches are zero click. This was a study earlier this year, and another even more recent study by Columbia Journalism. We found that it was 69% to zero clicks. So if all of this is true, you may wonder if news even matters. Well, today we'll show you why it does, spoiler alert, and what to do about it. The landscape is changing and so are sources of information. In public relations, the goal is to create an awareness that shapes an attitude or perception that drives a behavior. In order to do this, we need to look at content people consume and trust. We need to meet them where they are. And keep in mind, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach as audiences continually become more and more fragmented in their own realities. What I consume is different what you consume, and we're experiencing different realities. I think we're seeing that even more so today with the way we're using AI search engines. I put in something in my ChatGPT, you put it in yours. We're seeing totally different responses. We live in different realities. This is confirmed on social media and through other tools. So what are people consuming today? Well, print and radio have minimal impact. That's not surprising. Broadcast surprisingly still matters, but that's particularly around live events, like sporting events that still attract an audience. Digital sources are the most prominent source of news consumption. When we think about digital, what does this mean? How many of you read a piece of a news article on social media, right, that your friend shared? Or did you ask a question on ChatGPT or Google or Gemini, right? These are digital sources of information. People are getting information from social channels and AI search engine outputs, so we need to meet our audiences there. In a Harris Poll study, and this is a really interesting and recent study on this topic, but there's many studies on trusted source of information, it's not surprising that personal connection is the most trusted. But keep in mind, these may even be what we call parasocial connections, like a consumer with an influencer on Instagram. Local media and industry-specific media outlets still are more trusted than companies. This is interesting. As trust is declining overall, thinking about more specific publications may be key to understanding where there is trust. In a study I conducted about a year ago, I found a really interesting nugget. I was really interested in the concept of newsletters, and I predicted that they would be a source of trusted information because they're vetted. They come from someone we trust. And as you know, we trust people, not necessarily organizations or even a publication. And I've actually seen a rise of newsletter consumption. But back then, what I saw is trust was high in newsletters, even though consumption was low. And I would assume that this is going to go up. We're getting email newsletters. We're seeing news more and more curated for our consumption.
So just kind of call that out. There are newsletters that provide greater informational value on specific subjects than the Wall Street Journal does in its entire material about a single industry. They'll also sell a subscription to that newsletter for $150. So, what we're really seeing is a bifurcation of information quality, but also demographic groups and where they're consuming news. That big digital news bucket, about half of that is pure online news. Half people are going to actual news websites and reading news. The other half are collecting some quality news out of podcasts, some out of newsletters. Those are about 8 to 11% year over year, depending on who you're talking to, but it's usually Pew that I look at. When we look at digital on the social side, you really see this split more so. Older folks watch a lot more broadcast. They read more online news, and they're still the same group that are reading print. But everyone else, and I mean 60 and under, are online, and online at huge percentages. And the difference between where they spend their time online is just as important as the difference between broadcast and Reddit. Those two worlds are just as different as each other. So if you're looking at this view, just between gender, you have 15-point gaps in some cases between social networks. So you have splitting of realities even within demographic groups that are cohesive and similar. Then we actually look at broader societal trends. This explosion, it splits reality. People are literally living in different information ecosystems. When people talk about alternative facts, it's not just alternative facts, it's alternative news sources. A 29-year-old will have a completely different frame of reference from their grandmother. That isn't really surprising, but now we can see it and make it really, really specific. So, the reality is 2 to 3 hours of broadcast news a night for some folks. For younger generations, it's 3 to 4 hours of TikTok or Reels. So what's happening is this split between human readers. There are fewer of them reading news, and the amount of news being created, which is AI slop. I'm calling this the derpening of the internet. Brian Roderick has another term from Garbage Day. I won't share it. If you Google it, you'll find it. The good news is that you can ask search systems, AI chats, other tools, solutions like Fullintel to get better sources, and you can curate these data to improve them. But just when good data has its day in the light, data has so much value right now. Credible news has so much value right now. AI slop is everywhere. Thank goodness we have solutions now to actually filter it and make some contextual understanding of the stuff that is good and find what's good first. Now that value is so focused on credible news. We know credibility is more important than ever. We've been studying this really, really carefully. So we did a study particularly around pharma news to look at AI citations. Where are sources actually being cited by AI? Which sources specifically? We broke that down by owned sources, so your brand, third-party sources like National Institute for Health or the FDC, FDA, any of these organizations that talk about any industry, but they are not media. They are third-party. They account for 3/4 of the share. They're much harder to influence. News is the name of the game. Muckrack found in their study, they said about 89% is earned media. They have a different definition for earned than us. They think of any third party as earned. Well, when they pivot that down, only 27% of citations referred to journalist-driven content. So we're not too far off between our two realities, between the two different data points. Hey, we're shaping and honing this in. So the point is that this is the only game in town. If you want to mediate influence with LLMs and with ChatGPT, the best place for you to start is the place you've already been targeting. You might need to target different sources, but that 22% is there for you to grab.
When we think about AI, what we really want and think we're going to get is fast, accurate, and automatic, right? What we often end up getting instead is annoying, noisy, and error-prone. So how do we unlock the AI potential? The key is human curation. This is how we get the value out of AI and how we use AI to really benefit our measurement and what we're doing in communications. So when we think about measuring what matters in this new zero-click landscape, I would like to share 3 recommendations that you can consider wherever you are on your measurement journey that can be applied today to help you better prove value and improve performance. They all integrate some level of human and some level of AI. So I'm going to walk through those today. And the first one is share of model. Whether you call this GenEO, AEO, AIO, AISEO, LLMO, or any other combination of letters, what we are talking about is how a brand is appearing or in reality is likely to appear in response to prompts in AI search engines like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Google AI overviews. While this is something to measure, it is still a little bit of what I call fuzzy science. I love science. This is a little bit fuzzy science. There are hundreds of companies that have created businesses around GenEO, so I'm sure you can think of a few. It's also something you can replicate on your own, right, with certain closed models. The way that most are approaching this is by creating a series of personas, right, that represent your audiences and prompts. This is similar to what we did in that Fullintel study that James mentioned earlier. So you can create personas, which would be a long prompt describing in detail your different unique audiences for your brand. So for example, let's say I'm Ozempic, I make a weight loss drug. Maybe one of my personas I might create is something like a 42-year-old white female who is concerned about family history of type 2 diabetes. She wants to lose 40 pounds for health and longevity, not just aesthetics. She's research-oriented, skeptical of miracle fixes, but open to doctor-recommended options. And she balances costs with long-term health value. Does that sound like a prompt you've probably put in before? Right? So this is one way to create a persona. You're essentially describing the behavior, the demographic, the psychographic. We've done this in the past with different audiences. What we're doing now is feeding that into an AI search engine as our persona. You then run a series of prompts that this persona or audience member would likely ask a ChatGPT or Google. How do you get the prompts? Well, you can ask ChatGPT to help you or look at Google search questions. What are people asking? With thousands of AI search outputs from different combinations of personas and prompts, you get a sea of information from which brands are identified and analyzed for factors like share of model. How much of that output conversation is this brand, in my case, Ozempic, showing up in all of those outputs? Okay, here are a few flaws with this approach. First, it's not real. It's a created reality that is likely to represent reality, but is difficult to test. I'll get into that a little bit more. Second, each organization who creates a model may be looking at an entirely different reality. Okay, there may be similarities, but you might develop it one way, someone else might develop another way with different personas, different prompts, and see a different reality. And third, even with the best personas, it is near impossible to create all the nuances of our realities with just a prompt. Geolocation, search history. When I go into my ChatGPT, it has all the searches I've ever done, and it tailors answers to please me, right? I'm located somewhere different than you. I get a different response just based off of my geolocation. So there are different factors. However, while there are limitations, and again, I have to tell you the limitations because I'm a bit of an academic, and we put this in all our papers, to current methods due to restricted data access, these approaches are still helpful in understanding what is likely to reach and influence key audiences. In our field, you have to be very comfortable with the likelihoods. And when you look at potential solutions, hopefully they'll help you think of some questions you should ask. Okay, so make sure to ask about approaches, like how are personas set up and how are they used? Some models skip this step and they go straight to prompts. So make sure you ask about that and make sure the output volume is high enough to draw conclusions. If you do just one round of personas and prompts and you have, 10 personas and 30 prompts, that still might not be enough to really get an estimate of what people are likely to see. So really make sure you're doing multiple searches over a period of time. I've heard recommendations of at least 2 weeks of daily searches so that you have a big enough database to then start drawing some conclusions. So I hope that helps you as you're thinking about how do I measure share of model? What are some of my options? And like I said, there are tools you can use. You can also do it in-house depending on what your resources are, using some of the different options of AI search engines. So I hope that helps. I do think it's something we should look at even with the limitations. We're going to continue to learn and we might continue to get more access to this information because obviously it exists. It's a matter about getting access to it from the providers. And back to our questions about does news still matter? Yes. As a key driver of AI search engine outputs and direct audience reach, often through newsletters or social shares, news still matters. And when we look at pitching news or analyzing news, it's important to consider which outlets are more likely to get cited in AI search engine output. There are outlets that we know inherently have a beneficial impact based on their engagement with AI companies like OpenAI. So we think of them kind of these three buckets you see. One of them, they have signed deals. Now this is just an example with OpenAI, but whether, depending on what the AI search engine is, they have a signed deal. A lot of this you can find, it's public. You can ask the GPTs, give me the news about all the signed deals. They're likely to be prioritized. Next, there's publications that don't have a deal, but they're also freely accessible. These will be searched. The ones that have more of a credible reputation are more likely to be included. These are just some examples for the pharma space that you might see in that not blocked, accessible, and viewed as credible sources of information. And then the third bucket is really important as well. These are blocked for training. And in many cases, they might be suing the AI search engine companies, right? So that's something that we're seeing with the Anthropic case. There are multiple here. It doesn't mean these don't matter. They matter if your audiences are consuming them. Think of Bloomberg. Bloomberg is closed. It's not searchable, but it has so many subscribers and has value. So depending on who your audience is, you're a financial company, yeah, Bloomberg matters still, even if it's not picked up in the engines. But it's good to know which ones are, which ones aren't, so that you know where you're likely to get that amplification from the AI search engines. So that's really helpful to look at these different outlets because outlet is a key factor. But there are other quality factors that go into this equation as well. And these quality factors are considered in what we call the media impact score, a quality metric that we look at when we're measuring media content. Okay, so the media impact score, or MIS as we sometimes call it at Fullintel, it predicts how likely news coverage is to influence audiences. It predicts because the factors in the score have been tested for statistical significance and have been shown to lead to perception or behavior outcomes. Media measurement, ideally with a predictive lens, is the second recommended measurement that I have for you today. And just as a reminder, when it comes to media measurement, it's always important to look at a quality metric, which in this case is this media impact score, or it could be as simple as sentiment, next to a quantity metric, like a share of voice. I always make sure to provide context through comparison over time and versus competitors for any metric, because there's really no context until you have that comparison. It also provides transparency. You need to know exactly what is in it and how to improve a metric when you're using a quality metric that might include several factors. When we look at the media impact score, and this is something we've been doing for a long time, and many of you have been doing something similar for different periods of time, we found something really interesting through the AI lens. We found that many of the same things that influence humans also influence machines. However, we also found that two of the factors in our score seem to have a little bit more impact or importance when we're thinking about influencing the machine audience. Outlet, which we talked about, those AI outlets, those ones that get a little more preference, and inclusion of credible voices. So we've added a little more weight to these elements in this metric in the updated MIS plus AI factor. So we're really factoring in reaching humans and a really important channel to reach humans. And most importantly, the media impact score has been tried and tested on several occasions. We've conducted research to select and weight the factors that go into the score, but we've also done tests on the other end that show a trend relationship over time between the media impact score and outcome metrics. In this case, I'm showing favorability, where we found that peaks or dips in the MIS led to peaks or dips in reputation with a 2 to 3 day lag time. Now let's dive in just a little bit more. I like to group the factors in the media impact score into kind of 3 buckets: recall, audience, and perception. I'll briefly highlight some research that drives each of these factors. So first, I conducted a recall study with an experimental survey design to understand if these 3 factors lead to recall. Do we remember things better? The study found, yes, all 3 lead to increased recall. It also showed that branded visuals had a greater impact than headlines or prominent mentions, driving 200% greater recall. This is why I always recommend including visuals in the media impact score. But just another note here, not all visuals have the same impact. In a follow-up study that I did on engaged time, how long we spend with content, because more time means more opportunity to influence and remember, I looked at what factors make someone engage for longer with content. I found that branded visuals with a human element are the best. Okay, so if it's positive, we want brand plus human. If it's negative, avoid brand plus human. These three factors aid with human recall, but also are factors that influence how content is used by AI, right? More prominent content that answers a question is more likely to be used in a response to a querying prompt. Now, you might have all the recall factors, but if you're not reaching the right audiences who have an opportunity to consume and recall, it's all in vain. You need to make sure you're reaching the right audiences. Just as all content is not equal, all media outlets also do not have the same impact on audiences. Do not look at reach alone. We need to look at it in context with your audience and tier media outlets appropriately. Prioritize AI outlets, as we've mentioned, and consider social amplification because this is another key outlet for consuming information, right? How is a news article shared and engaged with on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn? That will amplify the audience. And the third bucket is perception. So let's say an article has all the recall factors and is reaching the right audience. Now we want to make sure that the content of the article is positively shaping perception. This is where we look at sentiment and we look at voices. Sentiment's pretty straightforward, so I'm going to talk for just a minute about voices. These are anyone quoted directly or indirectly in news coverage, and they're really key to shaping perception. Research shows that credible voices like doctors or researchers drive higher engagement than other voices like executives or government voices. Authentic voices like consumers or patients can be credible too, okay? Research also shows two is better than one, so look for two voices in your coverage. The best combo would be what I call a really credible voice with a really authentic voice. An example of this could be a patient story that includes a doctor and a patient. And just to dive in just one more notch on trusted voices. Research also shows us that trusted voices have a greater direct impact on sentiment. Now, there's some overlap in trust and credibility, right? A credible voice is often a trusted voice. In one study that I did, NGO voices, which would be regarded as a trusted voice, were 30% more visible than non-trusted voices. In this case, it was government. And they influence sentiment to a much greater degree, over 200%. So at the end, authoritative voices may influence the machine, and the more authentic really influence the human. So we want to look at both in terms of building trust of our audiences. Now, the third measurement that I'd like to leave with you today, or recommendation, is to measure reputation. Typically done with survey and any other outcomes to organizational goals as well. This could be increased sales. I think all of these are important to show the progress and also to bridge the impact. If I look at sales data alone, I know that's the goal, but it doesn't tell me if I had anything to do with it, and it doesn't give me any direction on what I can do to make a positive impact on that outcome that's the goal of my organization. So to me, to be able to show that journey and to pivot, we want to look at different data sets. Some of those I mentioned today. So to measure reputation, we really care what the humans think, right? Our audiences are human, not the machines. However, we can use AI to give us a pulse of our audience perceptions and attitudes for just a more frequent evaluation. This allows for course correction along the way. Daily surveys would be great. Not everyone can afford them. I love daily surveys and brand reputation surveys. But if we can't have that, what you can do in the meantime, and is an affordable option, is you can use AI to predict how audiences will likely respond by creating a synthetic or proxy audience. This is just an AI-generated model of a target group. Again, those really great prompts of your personas, right? Now you ask questions. What do they think about this? How would this land? Do they trust this? Do they trust that? However, at the end of the day, survey still matters, right? It's a good tool to have and use, but take it in that context, right? It's not the end-all be-all. Surveys can help identify trends and confirm reputation and trust results. So I like to think of these three data sets in a triangle. They triangulate brand influence, the AI search engine output data, the media data, preferably predictive quality metrics like we've shared here, and what I'm going to call survey data that we can use for reputation or behavioral intentions, and then of course behavior data as well. This trifecta can elevate how you show the value of communications and how you guide your public relations strategy. And you likely have noticed that while AI is integrated as both a data source and a tool in all of these, they include a level of human curation.
So that human curation is so important. When we think about early warning systems that work, there's some really great models out there. We all have the one in our home. It's a fire detector. The fire detector at all times is guessing whether there's smoke in the air. You think about radar. It's using electromagnetic waves to guess. Hey, we're guessing. Is there a plane there? Oh, no, there is. Oh, wow, there is. There's a plane there. You need the plane in the sky, and you need the smoke in the air. We all need to get better at guessing what that smoke would be. We need to hypothesize more, monitor more, and listen more so we can find the informed signal. We need to guess that the fires exist. Even with automated solutions, even with AI, we as a whole industry need to get better at that guessing. We're going to show you how to do this. We're going to give you some little tools and some ideas and how you can put this into practice. First, you are the predictive machine. I promise you, you are. We really are. You've heard this before. Humans are pattern-seeking animals. Philosopher and psychologist Carl Jung said that. A whole bunch of other people have, going back hundreds of years. Carl Sagan, it's not only guys named Carl that say that. He wrote The Dragons of Eden, The Pale Blue Dot. We are really good at identifying patterns. And when I was a PR professional, and still when I consult with our customers, the emotional operating system for me is anxiety. And it's personal. I feel it. And I want to feel it when I'm thinking about a brand. It's because those fear responses are how I'm going to be able to think about the thing lurking in the background, the spillover risk. The only challenge is that there's a lot going on in this world today. There's too much going on in this world today. And there's, you need some performance enhancing information. So studies by the NIH, and this is again a long period of scholarship in medicine and science, people can have about 3 to 5 big conceptual ideas that they're at any given time. If you have a big issue landscape with 12 distinct issues, that's too many ideas. And we need better systems to fill in those gaps, specific bits of information at the right time to fill in those gaps. What gaps am I talking about? We all have to be honest about our media diet. We're not only consuming news all the time. We're not news machines. This is directly related to my work. That's the part of my media diet that's related to work. It's actually a lot. I read a lot of news. But then I also read a lot of other stuff. I spend a lot of time reading about films, listening to film podcasts, reading about planes. And then there's stuff I just do for me and my kids. I'm an expert on Paw Patrol. What do you want to know about Mayor Hemdinger? Help, seriously. But you all have your media diets. You have your gaps. I don't watch TikTok. That's a huge gap, as we know now. I need to fill in those gaps if I want to make any sense as a consultant talking to a consumer brand. I use tools to do that. Everyone needs to use tools to start filling in those gaps. And those gaps don't just exist in what you're seeing coming in at you today. Those gaps exist 30 or 40 years going back. Because your stakeholders today, some of them were around 20 years ago, especially on issues that they care about most. People will dedicate their entire lives to making sure their reality happens. So let's talk about what their reality is. You can use AI to look back to help you look forward. I like automotive. Everyone understands automotive. People have a really good sense of what a car is and how they're made. A lot of people that are employed, they make a lot of cars. There's a lot of money involved. I looked back 75 years and I categorized major issues that persisted. I looked at news article data to determine size, but also did the AI find the ideas? I found hundreds of them, hundreds of issues, and I categorized them and I manually evaluated them. I'd recommend you do the same. And if you want to talk more about how to construct this on an industry by industry basis, I'm really happy to help you do this because there's good methodologies for it. But you think back, the biggest ones are not the things of today necessarily. Safety issues were a big problem. And labor, these are cyclical issues. We know this. As innovation changes, cyclical issues, you'll see them again. When you think of automotive in the 1970s, I've asked this on conference floor at PRSA to a bunch of students, even very young people saying, oh, like the oil crisis, there was a price shock, it was really expensive. Yeah, there was 2 periods related to the Yom Kippur War and some other challenges with Iran that really emphasized there was a cost to oil and gas and it increased costs. Okay, that's true. And there were labor disputes. There's always labor disputes. Go back to the 1980s. I'm a huge fan of Die Hard. It's the Christmas season. That movie is all about Japanese cultural and economic capitalization in North America, in part. It's a big, and John McClane being cool. All of the issues that were major issues in the 1970s and the 1980s are currently ongoing in 2024 to 25. This is the issue landscape for automotive. It is a burning fire of different issues. Competition, trade wars, Canada, United States, all these different labor unions that are about to go on strike. New innovations with EVs, all this. It's a sea of change. This is too much to conceptualize. And unless you have a long history and really done a lot of reading, you could step on landmines in your conversations about labor unions. The labor unions and the big three have done a lot of partnership to maintain each other. And same with criticisms of government. The governments have bailed out the auto companies. So they're all kind of working together. They got to be careful in those communications. You got to be stakeholder managing well. Your stakeholder publics are different. History matters. So when you think about that brief, how do we fill it? What would you fill it with to make it more useful for you? What information can we provide? What information are you looking for? We have to ask that question. I want to know what the labor dispute sentiment is specifically this week. I want to be able to change that metric on a week-by-week basis sometimes. I want the key insights from multiple different types of media altogether. I want Genio data. I want social data. I want what matters now. And I want analysts that are going to look at it and help provide that for us. This sounds a lot like human curation, just pivoting it in a little bit of a different way. We also still need to show you the receipts. We can't just tell you the insight's true. We got to show it to you. There better be a data sheet behind it if we're going to make or break $1 billion plan on it. And ultimately, we need to really showcase exactly why it matters. Put that in context directly related to your brand. We need to move from being aware, which is useful, kind of, to being informed, because it gives you what's next. And we're really trying to find new ways to deliver that information. What are the things you want? Let us know. We want to see it. We want to know what data source it is. Our humans can bring it in. So in terms of what you can monitor right now, start your issue history. Shoot me an email. Let's talk about just how do we use, because you can use that to actually design out your go forward monitoring program. What are the issues and who are the stakeholders that are activating on that? Don't just tell me the number of mentions related to the topic. Tell me who is activating against me actively. Who are the voices that are talking about me? Are they any good? Are those discussions bad for me in the context of the business unit and efforts that I'm delivering? Who are the podcasters that I should reach out to? Who's actually going to answer our emails? So we're not just looking at mentions anymore. We need qualitative signals based on what your brands and what your information diets need. What's your organization's information diet? Is it good? Finally, let's get back to this view. What did you remember? Don't need to answer it. And if anyone's on chat does and can think about it, really, what do we remember when we're engaging on this? The power of memory is really, really impactful for us. And don't worry, I'll show you if you're sitting on the edge of your seat trying to think through it. This is what it was. There might be things you don't remember. There might be perception in itself is a dangerous thing to assume. Don't assume. There's new tools and ideas and metrics that we've discussed today, which can help predict the possibilities. What is the universe of the possible? If we can look at the past and look forward, nothing is going to come back to bite you. You are the predictive machine. Your anxiety signals and your fear for your brand, fear for your job in some cases, they're going to help you, but you need to fill that information diet. We need to help you make it easier. But it starts from moving from being aware to informed. Thank you all so much for your time. We'd love to take any of your questions while we still have some time.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. If there's any questions, just put them in the chat. Ted is going to surface those for us. So please let us know if there's any questions. And again, we're happy to connect. You have our email address here. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. Hopefully we'll see you in person at some point. But do feel free to ask any follow-up questions. But right now, if there's anything, again, you can just put them directly in the chat or the Q&A. We'll give you just a minute to check that. So one of the questions here is, if you have a limited budget or bandwidth and you can't do all those measurement recommendations, where do you start? What do you pick? Right? Because oftentimes when you think of that, you say, oh, well, that's a lot of data sets. That's a lot of work. I don't have that budget. I don't have that team to be able to drive that. So it's a great question. So one, yes, you want to use AI where you can, but you still need to be very careful in what you're picking and choosing. Okay, if I really had to pick two things, right, I would pick probably media measurement, because it still matters. And it doesn't have to be just media, it can be any content, right? Depending on what your brand is. I call it kind of a content measurement. Wherever your audience is getting information, we should measure that, right? Because it is a predictor of the outcomes. So I would measure that, and then I would take an outcome measure that typically you already have. You don't have to do work, right? So if you can only pick two, get those two, because if you have to do a survey, you don't have one, that could be a little bit more expensive. But if I can only do those two, I just do the media, look at an outcome metric, and then of course, look within your organization, because that middle point, that survey that I was talking about, that reputation measurement, oftentimes exists in your organization, but maybe not in your umbrella. So it might not be under public relations. Maybe there's a consumer team or a marketing team that is doing a reputation survey, and you might already have access to that data. And also, you might be able to add one or two questions that make it a little bit more relevant to connect the dots. For example, you might ask, a question about media exposure, right? Have you seen any news about this brand or this initiative in the past 2 weeks? This can help make those connections between what you're doing on the communication side, what is influencing reputation, and then what is, of course, driving those outcome behaviors.
Just add on to that, like the cheapest thing you can do is fill in your own brain, fill in that mental model. It's not a tool, it's not a measurement, it's a self-defense, it's a prophylaxis from self-error. And what we're seeing in market, live in market, is brands that are forgetting themselves, brands that are picking up off of misinformation and making brand decisions. Cracker Barrel, that was an automated conversation, that was bots. If you can avoid the cell phones of a person forgetting the audience and forgetting the brand history and knowing the stakeholders, then it's really about putting the right message in place and being honest to your brand. Oh, awesome. So this is a question related to kind of different functions, but how do we really put an issue history into practice? That's a great question. So the first thing, you need to look back. So you need to spend some time, go year by year, and then category by category. Start really broad. Hey, ChatGPT, hey, Gemini 3.0. What issues have existed over the last 50 years in this industry? Start super broad and then narrow it in by 1 year at a time. Okay, what about 1971? What about 1972? What about 1973? And then go 2 or 3 years at a time by category. Competition and trade wars between 1970 to 1930, or 1971 to 1973. These bigger issues should persist between that time scale. And ChatGPT or Gemini will actually do a good, it kind of stopped at this point because like there's a new president, or yeah, that CEO got fired and the fraud investigation sent him to jail. Like, yeah, it closed down after a couple of years. You should see that trend change. And what you're asking the system to do is log them as individual issues. And we end up as a big honking list of issues that you can then index. It looks a lot like an article sheet that we'd share with you, or that you generate out of the Fullintel Hub or generate out of something. But from that, then you have data. You're able to say there are 32 issues in competition and trade war. There's 19 phase 3 trial failures on Alzheimer's drugs over the last 10 years, or what have you. Wow, we really need to better frame what these drugs do because they keep failing. How do we build better tests? So in practice, it's imagination, and it's a few hours in ChatGPT or Gemini.
This issue history, historically would take a lot of time to put together, right? It's important to know what's happened, what crises happened, for your brand, for competitors, for the industry. And AI facilitates that. And again, has this almost infinite memory as far back as there's information on the web, right? It can access those records. It can access those articles. Anything that is available is shaping the memory of the AI search engines. So this issue history, it really isn't so complicated and doesn't take, the time it took before, but it will help you identify these are the things that happened, and you'll find it's quite cyclical. We know this. There are certain issues that we tend to see come up again, especially particular to your industry. So as you see what's happened for competitors, for your brand over time, you can also now have a more effective strategy for crises in the future. You can measure more effectively what happens when you don't say something, because in the past, when someone said something, it didn't go well, right? So you can say, hey, making a conscious choice to not engage in this issue actually helps save our reputation because in the past, this is how it played out. So it is really helpful to get that the issue history so they can develop, well, what should we be tracking today, right? That's what's going to help you identify what are the risks.
I really like that. You look back to look forward.
Yep.
Let's find your side effects, everybody. What is like in this the idea? There's an Ozempic baby boom, and this little bucket is a share of voice of the Ozempic brand in relation to all of its side effects. What's the benchmark when a drug has too many side effects? When it's really a reputational risk to the company? I'm not sure if that's a measure anyone's thinking about at Novo Nordisk, but that's the one I do. I want to find that. I want to find more of that and surface it to people exactly where they need it. Um, Issue histories are a great way to also do a keyword evaluation and understanding all of the players. I'm doing this with our customers kind of on a week by week basis and even prospects because it gives me a better understanding of how to consult with you. So we're really excited about this, and thank you all so much for your time. Do we have any more time, Angela?
I think we're just going to wrap it up here. I
No,
see
we
a
have
question
one
from
more
Ted.
question.
Oh, that's a
Sorry. That's a
really
great
kind one,
question,
Ted. He's going to
Angela.
embarrass me. I just won the Executive Professional of the Year at AMEC, which again is our biggest measurement organization. So I'm just really humbled, really excited about it, and really happy for this recognition. So again, check out AMEC. You'll see my face on the website for this recent award. And thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It was great to see your names. Have a great